Welcome back, whoever's listening. And tonight we're going to be getting into the exercises for chapter 21, which is the imperfect indicative. And we read through, the last time we met 2 weeks ago, we read through the chapter, most of it at least, and now we're going to be putting it to use. There is one little thing we didn't read last time we met, rather. It's on page 238 in the textbook. It's called exegesis, and it gives 6 slightly different uses or ways the imperfect tense can be used. And we're going to be seeing that as we go through the exercises. I don't think we ought to read that tonight, but I think
230?
238.
Oh.
Exegesis, there's 5 points here about how the imperfect tense can be translated depending on the needs of the context. But as we get into the exercises, we'll be discussing that. So let's read that on your own. They give examples in scripture of each one, and we'll be doing some in the exercises too. So back to the workbook, the parsing exercises. Dave, I know you worked on this. Did you have difficulty with any of them?
No, I don't think so, really.
Okay, let's take 2 or 3 of them just to get our feet wet. I'll do the first one, number 1. It's kind of almost intuitive. See the epsilon, which is the augment, but then right. the root is very visible there. Beta, alpha, P, T, tau rather.
So recognizable.
And so the lexical form then is baptizo. And since it has an augment and it has the same root as the present tense, I'm going to say it's imperfect, active indicative. And the ending epsilon sigma tells me it's second singular. Therefore, the inflected meaning is you singular were baptizing. Okay. You want to take the next one, Dave?
Sure.
Akuon?
Yes. Again, this is fairly likely to be imperative, given that it has the.
You mean imperfect?
I'm sorry. I meant imperfect.
I know.
Because of the it's not called a preface, but
the augment.
The augment. It has the augment, so it appears to be imperfect, and it turns out this is the active voice, and it's both first and third person.
Good,
form.
You caught that.
It's first person plural, first person singular, or third person plural, same form.
Very good.
And it's akuo is the lexical form. This inflected meaning is either I was or they were hearing.
Okay. One little thing there. Why is the first letter, the augment, not an epsilon?
Yeah, okay, you're gonna, because it's actually because the I don't know what the right term is, but root? With the epsilon, when it's the augment's put in front of the alpha, it lengthens to eta.
There you go. Yeah. Whenever we have a stem or a root that starts with a vowel, then you have to, the augment becomes a lengthened form of that vowel. Okay. Let's pick one that's a little more complicated. Ason, number 7.
Sure.
That looks to be a form of ame. And the best way to do with that verb is to memorize it.
It's interesting. It sort of follows a pattern, but the pattern's not exactly what you would expect. I was looking this up. It's interesting what the ending of that looks like, but anyway,
there's a reason for that.
Sure. Yeah.
All of the verbs that we have had and will have for quite a while until we get near the end of the book are omega form verbs. They end in the lexical form ends in an omega. But there is another type of verb that doesn't do that.
Mhm.
They're called me verbs,
Hmm.
mu iota. The ending is not omega, it's mu iota.
Sure.
And that comes from the older classical forms of some of the verbs. And ame is one of those.
Okay.
And that's why you have slight differences. But there are some things that are familiar, like the first plural is amen. Well, that's the same ending as what we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Or ameth.
Yeah.
But ason is third plural of that verb. It's imperfect. And so that's third plural, imperfect active indicative of a me, and it's simply they were.
Right.
Okay. Let's try number 9. Dave, you feel brave enough for that one?
Sure. Hetsusi. Hetsusi.
Now there's a rough breathing at the beginning.
Hetsusi. Sorry. I don't really see it.
Yeah, hard to see.
And hopefully got this right. I believe that's in the future form.
Yes.
And its root is echo.
Right.
And so in this case, it is a third person plural active indicative.
Mm-hmm.
They will hold or they will have.
Very good. Yeah. And I'm going to do number 10 myself. Erotone.
Right.
Okay.
I thought this was interesting.
That's
okay.
The lexical form of that is erotao. It's an alpha contract verb. And the ending omega nu instead of omicron nu is the result of contraction with the alpha of the connecting vowel. Alpha plus omicron becomes omega.
Yes, that makes sense. Yes.
But since it said ending, the third plural, first singular or third plural, you've got two options, just like a coon, which we did. Lexical form again is erotao, but the inflected meaning then is I was asking, or asking for,
Mhm.
or they were asking for.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of straightforward. Warm-up exercises. Alpha. Eboptidzan autus. Well, we have an augment here, the epsilon, and we have the zeta, which is the same
Sure.
present tense stem as the present tense. So that looks to me like an imperfect. And I'd say it's the third singular ending.
Right. Right.
He, she, or it was baptizing. And autus is accusative plural masculine of autos, which is them.
Right.
He was baptizing them. Not too surprising. Next one, let's read it together slowly. Daimonia Allah exebalon. Exebalon. Now the verb, where is that?
It's exebalon.
Right. Does it have one or two lambdas?
It has two.
Does that tell you anything?
Yeah, there's a rule for that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And yes, I see that, but it also has the augment.
Right.
Which is going to and what is the root? What is the root? It has a single lambda.
Yes. So that's the present tense
in the present tense stem, and then it gets doubled. Forget the rule why that's so, but
well, let's hold off on that because when we get to chapter 22, which is the aorist tense, we'll talk much more about that, and let's not make a big deal of it right now.
But so it's, I'm sorry. I
You
don't
do
have my notes
recognize
here.
it as an imperfect, though.
Yes, it's an imperfect. I forget how I found this, but it's what is the inflect the I don't have the lexical in front. No, I didn't write it down.
Ekbalo.
Ekbalo.
Mhm.
Okay. Ekbalo. And so yeah, that to get because so it becomes an edzabalo because of forget the rule with the epsilon.
Well,
Right. Why is that happening? I don't remember.
that's a good thing, and I'm having trouble
I
remembering
don't
it
remember
too.
why that happened,
But
it's
this
something
is
weird.
a compound verb.
Okay.
It's a preposition plus the verb. So you only augment the verbal part of it, which puts the second epsilon
That's
as
really
the
where the
augment.
augment is.
And then
Yeah.
the X is the preposition.
So it's ekbalo, blah, blah, in the present tense, and it becomes
Exabalon.
etzabalon.
Yeah.
So that's the weird thing about this.
X is the form of the preposition, but it changed the XP to a.
Yeah, because you don't. So let me see. Why is that? What's that rule? Because no, they don't want to pronounce that with the E after
I
it.
think that's
There's
it.
something weird about
I'd have
that.
to look it up.
It's not one of the rules we studied, but I saw that was really strange. And I'm like, okay, anyway.
But the augment is not the first letter, it's
No.
the third letter.
Yes, yes. Which means they were casting out.
Yes.
Or they were expelling or something to that effect.
But now the Omicron nu could be a first person singular as well.
It could. It could be so it could be he was or I would, but then it would mean I was casting out.
Yeah.
So yes, it could mean I was casting out or they were casting.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't have enough of the context, which
No, yeah.
it's Mark 6:13, the verse that he chose.
And we have many demons.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So they is the correct one.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Et baptizanto. Hoop autu. Okay, our verb is that et baptizanto, and that's the onto ending tells you that it's not active, it's passive or middle or passive.
Right.
So we're going to have to make a choice whether it's middle or passive. Now, it's not a deponent verb. So
third person plural, right?
Yes, it's third plural. And I'm going to say it's they were being baptized. I'm going to call it a passive.
But it could be either, right? I mean,
yeah.
If
it were middle, you would probably translate it, they were baptizing.
What we have here,
there's subject involvement with the middle.
Okay, but so in hoop is
by him.
Right. So it wouldn't make sense for it that way, right? I mean,
right. Middle wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense.
Baptizing is something that has to be either active or passive.
Yeah, you don't baptize yourself.
Right. Not unless you're some Harry.
No, but if it were middle, it could be treated like in English as active. But when we have the preposition by him, then it has to be it has to be an object, not
and I was gonna say, even if you're thinking of middle, you're thinking of something where the person's not directly doing the action, but they're receiving some benefit.
Yeah.
And it's like, how in the world would you do that?
Well, it's just
in baptism.
But in the structure, but in the structure of the sentence, we have something that's a clear subject.
Yeah.
Because of the preposition.
Yeah.
So it has to be a passive voice for it to work.
Yeah.
I mean, right.
Right.
That's right. That reminded me of a humorous story that Sherry told me when she was a child. The church they went to had baptism by immersion, and she saw somebody being baptized, and she was very impressed. She was only about 7 years old, I think, at the time, 7 or 8. Well, no, wait a minute. She had to be. Anyway, she was a child, And she lived in an apartment complex that had a swimming pool, or trailer park, I think, that had a swimming pool. And so that afternoon, she decided to round up a bunch of kids and have a baptism service.
Oh, goodness.
She was baptizing.
She's baptizing the neighborhood. God, that's all right. God has mercy on our ignorance. It was not truly a heresy.
They were not so willing to be baptized.
Was she forcing it?
Well, she was probably not as big as the rest.
Kids are wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Number delta. Erkanto. Pros auton. Well, what is the lexical form of that verb, erkanto?
Uh, I'm sorry.
Shorten the eta
It's
to epsilon. Urkamai.
Urkamai. That's
Yeah.
Urkamai.
That means
Yeah,
I
it's
go
a
or I
lengthened.
come.
And it's a lengthened vowel then. Is why
Yes,
we
it
have
is.
the air. Yeah.
Okay, so this is, and by the way, Urkamai ends in omai. It's
Yes.
a lexical form. So what does that tell you about it?
Doesn't have a it doesn't have the active.
Right.
It
It's,
has only the middle.
yeah, it's a deponent verb.
Yeah.
Or some, in the book, he has another term that he uses. I learned deponent, but
It's our middle deponent. I don't know.
yeah, I forget the term he uses, but I'm going to call it deponent. So it's imperfect deponent indicative, third plural. The onto ending tells you that. They were coming or they were going,
Right.
Pros auton,
Yeah.
to him. Well, the context of the verse would tell you whether it be coming or going.
Sure. I often find those contexts also. I'll be really honest, and maybe this is just me, but it sort of is the same because there's usually in most of these verses, there's no clear.
You mean between coming and going?
Yeah, because it depends on, but in many cases, I don't know what the perspective of the speaker is in terms of whether it's coming or
Right.
going.
Exactly.
And
I was
so it
just
doesn't make
thinking
any
the same
difference.
thing.
You know, and so I'm like, well, and maybe that's the whole point of the Greek is the perspective of the speaker doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's why they have one verb.
You're left wondering, was the person writing this with the person to whom they were all going, or was he with the people who were going?
Or it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a third person not involved in the.
Well, I'll tell you where it does matter.
Yeah, in some cases.
Do you remember that verse where Jesus was talking to the centurion? And the centurion was asking Jesus to come and heal his servant.
Yeah.
And Jesus didn't go with him. He gave him the word. And
well, he said, well, okay, I know.
Go home, your servant is healed.
Yes, go home.
I can't remember
the
word.
Go. Yeah, that would be go. Yeah, definitely.
But
that's
the centurion said, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof.
Yeah.
I'm a man under authority and I have servants under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another one, come, and he comes. Well, did they use Erkamai? Yeah.
Did they use Erkamai for both statements?
No, they did. He did not. He used a different verb. The word erku is the imperative form of that verb. I think that's come, and poruomai, I think, is the other. Poru is go. Poru is another deponent verb, but it doesn't mean come. It always means go.
Is that, it leaves me asking is that a distinction we're making in English that it can mean come or go? I really don't know.
No, it's not.
Because
that appears in every language I've ever seen.
One verb?
No,
that means both?
I'm
that's
saying
unusual.
that you have separate verbs that indicate.
It is,
Yeah.
but that's normal.
Yeah.
But we have this Greek verb that we're translating both ways. And like you said, Jesus said, the centurion said, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof. But He could just as well have said that you go under my roof. It wouldn't make any difference in the meaning.
Yeah,
But
That one.
when he has to
But the
say
command-
servants come and servants go, he has to use the other verb.
yeah. And in a military situation, it's a big difference to
Well,
say
yeah,
come or go.
sure,
I
yeah.
guess the one thing I can think of is in Russian, the verb system is set up so that the verb indicates the mode of transport. In other words, walk, ride, run, fly, sail. And the way you determine go, come, enter, exit is every single verb of motion has a prefix that you slap at the beginning. And
Oh,
that's what that prefix distinguishes whether you're saying go, come,
Okay,
go, go
Yeah.
around, go through.
sure.
But they use the same root for the verb.
Okay.
So,
So I'm just
walk
wondering,
to someone or walk or come from someone would be distinguished by that prefix or
Yeah.
the word. That's the closest thing I can see to this, but
well,
it's not the
it's not
same.
the same. So I'm just wondering if when I'm looking at, the New Testament and studying the Greek, so far, except that one you just mentioned, I mean, and you can probably show me more where it needs to be go,
one or the
one
other.
or the other,
Yeah,
and I'm wondering if it's actually always come and go is the other word. And if we always translated it come, does it still work?
um,
And I'm wondering
I'll
why,
give you something
know.
that might help you a little
Yeah.
bit, because, and it reminded me of what you said about Russian. There are two other verbs, compounds of erchomai, ace erchomai and ex erchomai.
okay,
Ace means enter, come in.
okay,
Ex erchomai means go out
Mhm.
or
Right, and then
depart.
kind of like the way Russian is, like
Yeah.
leap is to walk, but to walk into something would
so
be
I wonder if the verb is more like moving.
prihodhi, and to walk out of something is prohodhi. And so that would be to go or to come would be like that.
I wonder if it's, the concept is more like moving. They were moving.
Yeah.
They were moving
maybe.
to him,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't, that's an odd thing to say in English. They were moving to him, but it's almost like the usage seems that way. If they need to be more specific, they'll make it more specific.
Yeah. Context is going to make it clearer.
Right.
Right.
I just think that a lot of the context I'm seeing, it really wouldn't matter whether I said come or go.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make any difference. I know what's being said. Because it's a perspective thing. In the English, it's a perspective of who is observing it
Exactly.
and where they're located, which most of the scriptures, it doesn't matter.
And the focus
It's
here
narrative.
is more like who was doing the movement and what was the objective of the movement.
And most of the Bible is narrative,
Uh-huh.
and narrations, it doesn't really matter. Right? In most cases, it's not significant in a narration. Where do you say come or go? And it, we probably have a standard way we do it. But,
Right.
Well, here's something that I might consider. Remember, early in the ministry of Jesus, Jesus had been announced by John the Baptist,
right.
and there were some disciples of John the Baptist
Mhm.
who were interested in Jesus when he appeared on the scene,
that's
because
right.
John introduced him.
Right.
Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.
Right. And they
And,
start following him.
They started following, and one of the disciples, I remember, said,
Where are you staying?
"Where are you staying?"
Right.
And Jesus' answer to him was, "Come and see."
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, he could have, if he used the word erchomai, it could have been translated "go and see," which kind of implies
That would be odd. That
it
wouldn't
would be
work.
very odd.
That would be a very odd thing to say.
But then those same disciples, I think Andrew was one. He found his brother Peter, and
Yeah.
we found the Messiah, and he said to his brother, "Come and see."
Right.
Same thing.
And we say that, although we suppose that he went with him.
Yeah.
He could have said go and see and did
Yeah.
something else. We don't actually know, and it doesn't really matter, actually. the point's still made.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go forward.
Yeah, yeah.
So number epsilon, uk ecrinomatha. What is the lexical form? Where is the verb and what's its lexical form?
It's crinomai, right? No, it's I'm sorry, it's
Crino.
Crino, that's it,
Yeah.
Crino. So this then is
Putting an epsilon in front of
yeah,
crino.
it is the imperfect form, yes.
Yes,
And so it means judge,
yes, but is it
but
active or passive?
it's passive in this
Mhm.
case, yeah. That well, it would be passive or middle, but it it wouldn't make a lot of sense if it were because of that form. It's likely passive.
Mhm.
We were being judged, but then we have the ook, so it's we were not being judged.
Very good, yeah. This is from 1 Corinthians 11:31, but he's got parentheses around it, which is his shorthand notation that he modified the
Yeah.
sentence somewhat
And I
to
didn't
make.
look it up actually, but
I did. It's if we would judge ourselves, we would not be judged.
would not, which would be
Yeah.
a different
Yeah.
form of the verb.
Well,
Yeah.
no,
No?
it's also passive.
How does it
We
get
would not
conditioned?
be judged.
Would not. Where's the would from then?
Well, that's from the rest of the context. This, I wrote
Oh,
this.
oh, is it one of those conditionals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the then clause of a second class condition, which assumes the if clause is untrue for the sake of the argument.
Ah,
The entire verse reads, if we were judging ourselves, we would not be judged.
It's hypothetical, which is a.
but
Yeah.
it's actually in the Greek. It's what? It's actually what's the if? I forget.
Conditional?
The conditional in that.
Yeah,
Do you have it?
conditional. That,
That's it.
we'll get to.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, there's one in the translations I thought, but I don't remember anyway.
It could be, yeah.
I don't know. I saw one when I was looking this up. I may have gone and looked at anyway. It's all right.
Okay, let's do number zeta.
Oh, it's actually the next one.
There's the A.
Here's the
There's the
condition.
if.
Here's the condition.
Agar epistuita mouse pistuita emoi.
Emoi, yeah.
Okay, the first
You were.
verb, epistuita, has an augment. And it's got the same present tense stem in both of them, but the second use of it doesn't have the augment.
Right. So this one I have, if then you were believing Moses,
Right?
you will believe me.
Okay.
And that's not great. So the English I would say is if you were believing Moses, then you will believe me.
You would believe
Or
me.
you would believe me.
Yeah.
Then you would believe me. Yes.
This is,
yeah. It's
I
a
wrote
future tense. It can make it conditional.
I wrote a little notation here. The verb reads, for if you were believing Moses, well, I'm sorry. I think I got yeah, you were right. For if you were believing Moses, you will believe me. That you were right in that.
Well, and what would it be different?
Pistus seta, there, I overlooked the
Isn't that the
segment.
future tense?
It is future.
It's future, right? But can't that also be wait a minute now. I don't know how that, I mean, how would you show a conditional?
Well, this is
It
what you
does.
call a first class condition, not a second, which means you assume that
Right?
the if part is true,
Yes.
and then the then clause will be true.
Well, this is normal, but it doesn't. So it seems to me, what is this verse?
John 5:46, but it's also modified.
Oh, okay. I want to look at it's okay. I kind of want to look at.
Yeah,
this.
let's do it.
John 5:46.
Mm-hmm.
Ah. See, not some
Or if you believe Moses, you would believe me. Okay. The way he
Right,
modified it,
right.
he modified it to make it a first-class condition instead of a second-class condition.
I'm gonna look at that so I can see what you're talking about.
In the
Oh,
second-class
what?
condition, you have both of them in the imperfect.
Thing just messed up on me. I'm sorry. Slow to get there. 546.
And in the King James, they're clearly both conditional.
Mhm.
For had ye believed Moses, ye
If
would have
or
believed
you were
me.
believing Moses, you would have.
That's a second-class condition. It's not true that
Okay,
they
so he changed the verb tense.
Yes, he changed the
Yeah.
second
He
verb.
also took out the gar. Oh no, that's still there. I'm sorry. If then,
Yeah.
if then you were believing Moses, and he changed it to future tense.
Yes. He could have left it as an imperfect,
Okay, now
which if he had, you would
I just
translate
don't
it.
think
You,
anybody translates it this way. And I'm just kind of,
oh,
wondering
no,
why.
it's not a future in in the Greek text.
Well, you would believe me, and they don't
Yeah.
say would have been believed. Say you would believe
You
me,
would believe, yeah.
which is
But Mounts is just doing that because these,
right.
uh,
Right. So I translated you will
conditional
believe me because that's the future
tenses are
tense.
always the last things that grammar teachers will teach in any language because they're the most complicated.
What is? I'm sorry.
I said these
Conditionals.
conditional tenses are always
Yeah.
the last thing that grammar teachers teach in any language because they're the most complicated. So that's why Mounts is simplifying.
Yeah. But you're right, David. The way he has it here, future is correct. That's what he modified.
And the text has it actually in, I'm sorry, is that in the imperfect tense?
Yes, it
In the
is.
actual
They
text.
both have an augment, and they both have the present tense stem.
I'm looking real quick. Yeah, I believe I'm just checking again to look at it. Yeah, absolutely. Epistuete instead of
Pistusite.
pistusite. Which
Okay,
is,
last one in the
so why do they, okay, so me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So the simple translation would be, I mean, I don't really know. You, without it being conditional, would have been you were believing me. Why would it be you would have believed instead of you would believe?
No, I don't think it's correct to say you would have. That would be
I'm asking what?
that would be the aorist tense, I
Oh, is
think.
that okay? All
A
right.
different tense.
Now, I believe my interlinear actually does the wrong thing with it. It says you would have believed. I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
Well,
you know,
I've noticed that a lot of the translations we use
right.
get a little bit sloppy with them. They don't, um, they're not as consistent.
Yeah,
with
this
it.
is just an interlinear that someone, I don't even know its pedigree.
Yeah.
It's not an actual translation. It's helpful, but I know it has limits.
I've done a lot of comparison of verses in several different translations. And
Okay, well,
it's amazing to me how
I'll try to remember that.
free they are with their.
Yeah.
I try not to go too far afield from them, but there are times when, for instance, you would insert a have believed instead of just simply believed.
Okay.
Well,
thank you.
Elale autois ton logon. The verb under question is laleo,
Right.
and here we have an epsilon in front of it, the augment. How'd you translate that, David?
He was saying, or he was speaking.
Right.
And then it's just to them, the word.
Okay.
And the two is implied. I mean, in English, you need it.
Yeah, that's a
Them.
key word.
He was saying them, the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two verbs that can be, they're very almost synonymous. Laleo and lego. Lego means I say. Laleo generally I speak, but
Right.
sometimes they're interchangeable.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And in English, we've got a lot of different verbs. We could say, I say, I speak, I tell.
Like, because they probably came
Yeah,
from multiple
the engineer
languages.
is constantly asking me, is it correct to say tell or say in this sense? And I'm going, it all depends on the rest of your sentence.
Yeah.
And it's
Your choice
gonna
of
be
which way you
understood
wanna
anyway.
say it.
It's gonna be understood anyway.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's just like, is it better to say, I told my sister or I said to my sister? I said,
Yeah.
your preference is the same.
It's better if you don't, yeah, as long as you conjugate the verb, everybody will be okay
Right.
properly,
I guess, where she gets hung up is the fact that she's accustomed to having one structured way of doing it because Spain wasn't conquered by
Three different.
speaking a different language. So, she's got one structure for it, unlike, the British Isles where they've got two parallel ones.
Yeah, and the Germanic was actually made up of several languages before it got there. And then
Exactly.
the French brought in
French and
French,
imposed it
which
on
was
top of
also,
everything else.
which was a old French plus Latin.
Uh-huh.
Construct.
I've been doing translation in the book of John, and I remember in John 9, this chapter talks about the man born blind that Jesus healed. I remember they kept interrogating him, the Jewish leaders, interrogating him, who opened your eyes? How did it happen? And all that.
Man, I didn't see.
And
I don't know. He went away somewhere. I don't know who it was.
but there's one verse in here, it gets kind of humorous in a way. They kept after him to answer them, and he says to them, I told you before and you would not listen. Do you want to become his disciples too?
But they got really mad then.
That word, it's in verse 27. He answered them, I told you already. And the word is apon, I told, and that's a form of Lego. That's the aorist of Lego.
Okay.
So we'd have the tendency to say, I said to you already, but I think it's more expressive to say, I told you. That's the way the translators handle it.
Yeah, I told you. That's an interesting, because it's sort of a different force, isn't it?
Yeah,
I said to you.
It's
I
more
told you is forceful.
Yeah, it's forceful.
And I'm not sure whether the Greek has that expression in it.
Well, they may have,
I
or they
don't
can
know.
do it with other
Well,
words.
other ways, but certainly, but I'm not sure the words convey that. Yeah,
No,
English has got
Sure, although
so
the
much.
rest of the context of the story does seem to indicate the man was that exasperated with them that was probably his intent.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I think it
I
was.
said to you already.
Why else would he say, would you become his disciples too?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's sarcasm is what it is.
I said to you, well, the already, what is that word
It's
Greek?
a day
Which means
already.
I mean, as opposed to previously, or like, I mean, because there's a certain amount of in the English to say already, it's kind of, that's pretty forceful too.
Yeah,
Rather than I said to you before, or I said to you previously.
Because it's implied, weren't you listening?
Weren't you listening?
You
It
didn't pay
implies
attention
all
to
the
me
rest.
before. You're gonna pay attention this time?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
There's a lot of force in that English translation.
It
I was
is.
just curious at what the shades of meaning in the Greek are.
okay, well, we have finished all the parsing and warm-up. Do you feel like going ahead?
I'm okay to do that. I've done 6 of as far as you want to go, I mean,
Okay,
this is
let's do it. And
long
are
as
you
Ray?
tracking with us, Ray, pretty well? Okay.
You're quiet a lot. Do you want to slow it down to talk, or do you have questions?
I'm fine. I'm surprised I'm staying alert, but the longer we're going on, the more I'm being able to push work out of my mind and focus on this.
Is that good?
Yes, because what typically happens when I come here is it takes about 20 minutes of listening to this before I can forget all of the ideas about work that were going through my mind when
Wow,
I
man.
came in here.
Okay.
That's rough.
Does that happen when you go home at 2? You keep
Mhm.
thinking about work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So,
I mean, and that's nothing new. I mean, it was the whole time. I just the whole time since I've been an adult. But
yeah,
the
Well-
only times I've kind of got away from that was when I was working shift work, and when the new shift came in, I could hand it off to them, and I knew by the time I came back in the next day, everything that I handed off to them was going to be done, and it was going to be something new.
okay.
Right.
And
So it didn't
so-
matter.
Yeah, so it was.
Yeah.
It was not something that would be continuing the next day. That's the only time I would ever be able to go home and not think about work.
That's the
Well-
nice part about an operational operational environment is that what you're supporting happens now and it's intense. But when you walk away, it won't be the same when you get back in.
Exactly.
So there's not a lot to think about.
Exactly.
Well, I've been retired now for almost 3 years, and I used to dream about work even after I retired.
Mhm.
Or when I was working, I'd think about it at night or other times, and it's hard to get away from that. Okay, number 1, ekanos.
Ekanos.
That's our demonstrative pronoun. Is this a near or far demonstrative?
Well, that would be the far, right?
Yes,
Which is
that or that one. And it's a
that's
pronoun used as a substantive.
yeah. He
That
has a
one.
note on it, I think.
Footnote 1. Did you notice that the demonstrative is functioning as a personal pronoun? It is more apparent if you can remember the context.
Right. I actually had a conversation with Drew about this, which was
Okay. You want to tell us about it?
well, let's look at the whole sentence and
Okay.
then it'll make more sense.
Ekanos de is our postpositive. Elegan, peri to nau, to somatas out to.
Right. So um the verb here, so identifying what the subject of the verb is
Mhm.
very important.
Yes.
and and
What
the verb,
clues do you have?
well, the clues I have, and that's the thing that I was like not thinking about clearly, and I'm like, oh yeah, right. Clearly, ekinos is the subject of the verb because it's in the nominative form.
Yes, it is.
And that's very important to
Mhm.
know what it's pointing to.
Mhm.
Because in the previous sentence, it could be either Jesus or it could possibly be the thing he was talking about, which
Mhm.
would be conceptual. But you can't have the thing he was talking about speaking.
Right.
So it's got to be someone that can speak.
Okay. Very good.
Right?
Okay.
All right. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah. The elegant is our verb.
Elegant, yeah.
What is the lexical form of that?
It's
Lego. Yeah.
Lego, right?
Lego.
Lego.
Omega.
Um,
And the augment makes it imperfect.
Imperfect, yeah.
And the ending epsilon nu, what does that tell you?
It means it's first person singular.
Third.
I'm sorry, third person singular.
Okay.
Third person singular. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, which is why it works with the ekinos also. They
Mhm.
agree. If they didn't agree, we'd have some other problem.
Yeah.
And that means then that in any way of speaking about this in English, we really want to change that. We don't want to say that one. We really want to say he.
Yes.
Because in English, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, here's something, Dave, that might help you.
Yeah.
The way that language developed, at first they didn't have articles. They used demonstratives as an article. It's kind of like pointing.
Yeah, the articles
that
were actually are called, they're not exactly articles, they're actually called definitives.
Okay.
And when I've been looking, some people call
Okay.
them definitives. And actually, the interesting thing is that in the English is called a definitive,
Okay.
meaning you can use it to point to something.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
defining which one.
Right.
But yeah,
But
Yeah.
the article and the
Yeah.
demonstrative pronouns, they're related, and but the older forms were the demonstratives, and
really,
That's what I've read in several
So
places.
he could have, because I wondered about that. Why didn't he just use us? Which would have been the pronoun, right? And you're saying that that came in later.
Yeah, well, the Greek language was very
Well,
ancient.
It lasted thousands of years
Uh,
over a large part of the world.
mhm.
And certainly patterns of speech would have been whatever they were, and they weren't all the same everywhere. I mean, you can't, right? I mean, even in English, this is so true that in our own country, how people put words together is different.
Mhm.
If you go to England or Australia or New Zealand, you get yet different patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that going on for, it had been at that, in this time, it had been going on for 400 years or something.
More than that, I think.
When was Alexander the Great?
Homer was 8th century BC, I believe.
Yes, the whole language, but which means it was over 1,000 years. No, it was 800 years old. But the Koine Greek, as they call it, the non-classical Greek, was already 300 to 400 years old.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, and spread across a whole region.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
And the influence of the other
Right.
languages on it.
How
You say
people
a
would
region,
put
I mean, consider it spread across major
the whole
chunks
known
of
world.
2 continents.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the whole known world, the whole civilized world in their minds.
Mhm.
And so you know how much English is affected depending on, or Spanish, depending on the speakers who are speaking it, that's not their native tongue. They will end up doing things with it, which are legal, but are different.
Mhm.
There's major parts of 3 continents. We've got Africa.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm just telling you the thing I came through, because
Yeah,
I was
that's-
looking at that initially and thinking, why couldn't that be the concept? But then I look at, oh yeah, that would be stupid. That doesn't even work. There's no way to do that. That would have to be the object.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. So translate the sentence for us, Dave.
Sure. But he was speaking of speaking about the temple of the body of him, or speaking about the temple of his body.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, that word, the verb Lego, normally we would translate it as say, but here
That wouldn't make sense.
it's not quite correct English,
Yeah.
so speaking is better.
Yeah, it requires an object.
But it's not laleo,
Yeah.
lalesen.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because in English, right, you need an object for speaking. It begs for an object, and we don't really have one.
Okay, number 2. Kai pas aklos erkato pros auton kai edidasken autus.
All right.
Okay. Where's our subject? You see a nominative somewhere?
Yeah, the crowd.
Okay, the crowd.
Eklos.
Yeah. Okay. Kai pas aklos, and all the crowd.
Right.
Erkato. Now that's interesting.
Coming or
It's
going.
it's not third plural, it's third singular.
Yeah.
Why is that? What a crowd is a
Well,
whole group of people.
Well, that's right, but it matches the singular of the
Yes.
form. It agrees.
You think of a crowd as an entity,
Right.
not a bunch of different people.
If it had been anthropos,
Yeah, anthropoi.
anthropoi,
Yeah.
it would have been plural.
Yes, you're right.
All the men or
Mhm.
people, right?
Mhm. But the crowd was coming to, even in English, we would say the crowd was, not the
Right.
crowd were.
Now, I know there's some where they will make things singular that are otherwise plural in English, but yeah.
If we use the word people in English, we would make it plural. The people were,
Right.
not the people was.
Right.
But the persons, well, I guess that's the same.
Yeah.
Okay. But the crowd was coming, pros auton. What's that?
Oh, him.
To him.
Yeah, that's the
Kai.
accusative.
Edidasken.
And and he was teaching
Autus.
them.
Them, yeah. Okay, here's a case where I think you could use one of these alternative ways of translating the imperfect. Let's look at that page in the
Right.
book.
You could say he was beginning to teach them.
Yeah,
And
it's number 2 in the exegesis.
and I get that. And we're looking at the context and using the context to say that he was beginning to teach them because it seems that there wasn't something he was teaching them before the next part where we begin to get the teachings in this structure. But
it's a judgment call.
yeah, I'm just saying I don't know that there's any logical difference in the flow of everything. It's not hard to understand what's happening here.
Well, this is Mark 2:13.
Right.
It's early in the ministry
Yeah.
of Jesus.
And would you be able to, if you wanted to translate it that way that you're suggesting, began to teach them,
Yeah.
could you translate then that second chi as so? In order to show that was a result of or a consequence of the
Oh,
first part? He began to teach them?
there's another word you would probably use to translate so.
So it's Mark 2 what?
2:13. What went on before verse 13?
Because what you're
He was
suggesting is that they're
delivering-
trying to convey cause and effect.
Oh,
I'm not
Well, it
sure that's
could.
really what you're trying to do here. It's not really cause and effect because we don't know that he's teaching.
Well, I'm saying if you wanted to translate
it's
it
more like
as
time sequence, which,
began teaching.
yeah.
okay, but that's a time aspect, which isn't necessarily cause and effect. I mean, right? We don't know that he was waiting for them.
No, but he would not have, that wouldn't have been the
So right before it, we had
that is
him
a-
healing somebody who
that
took up
is
his
a
bed and
result of
walked.
the consequence of what they did.
Yeah.
So,
You could do that, but I think there you would use a different word and can't. It's an adverb, so
So,
utos, I think.
so that this is it's an interesting choice of translation because some of these are translated like I just wanted to. It's the context is there's not a lot of context around it. But previously, it healed somebody, then he went out again by sea,
Okay, so
and all
there's
the
a
multitude
separation.
came to him, and he taught them.
Okay,
and he was teaching them, and he passed by as he saw as he passed by, he saw the son of Alphaeus. These are really kind of broken up statements. Like there's
But
not a lot of context.
There's a clue here, I think, Dave,
Hmm.
where the first part of the chapter talks about Jesus being in the house, and a whole crowd of people was in the house. They had to lower the man down through the roof for
Okay.
Jesus to heal him. Okay, once that takes place, it says he goes out.
He went out again by sea.
He went out
Yeah.
from the presence of them. Wait a minute.
And all the
No, that's
multitude.
commanded.
I mean, it's like there's
Then
just a broken up thing here.
He went
goes
out by the sea.
and
But
they came to him.
But think about this. The multitude came to him, or the
Mhm.
crowd came to
Yeah.
him. Where'd the crowd come from?
It doesn't tell us.
No, not for sure, but the most likely thing was the same crowd that was in the house.
Sure, it could have been following him.
And so he didn't.
Well, he was teaching them. I mean, I'm not sure why. See, I don't see any context that demands any of this. But I mean, it's the only thing that would require it is if you're saying that he wasn't teaching until the crowd got to him,
Oh
because
no,
that's
he
the
was
people he was.
in the house. He was. Verse
Well,
2.
Then why would we say he began teaching then? You know what I'm
That's a
saying?
good point.
I
Okay.
just don't know why we want to do that, because now we're adding.
It's more like he continued
or
teaching.
resume.
Well,
Resume.
but why say anything? And he was
You
teaching.
don't have to.
I mean, I'm just uncomfortable with adding perception of context, which isn't necessarily required by the Greek.
Okay.
I mean,
You got a good point, Dave.
I don't know.
But that's something that you could do.
I mean, I wouldn't have any trouble if someone translated that way. It wouldn't really cause me a problem.
Yeah.
But it might kind of stick out. He began teaching them. I'm thinking, well,
Yeah.
is he teaching something new, or is it a new group of people?
Well, it might have been a new group
but
of people.
we
don't know
know.
that. Okay, it's just a I
Yeah.
wanted to point out that
No,
that's one way
I
you
understand it's one of those rules.
see, by saying he was teaching, that's kind of a bland way to say something, but to add a word like
I
began
know, it
or,
almost sounds like he was teaching somebody before and these extras came in and joined in,
could have
Well,
been,
no,
which is possible, I suppose. Because it could be that he was teaching his disciples who went with him undoubtedly when he left the house. And
Mhm.
the others joined in the lesson
But
as it was underway.
if you
I mean,
look at
that's-
the next sentence in the context, the next sentence, it moves on to something else. And he's
Yeah,
walking,
it
and now
does.
he's no longer in the ocean, he's gone somewhere.
Yeah.
And and he starts picking up disciples.
Yeah, Levi.
And it's really kind of that, in fact, he was teaching them. Well, it seems to indicate he was teaching the multitude that came to him, but it doesn't, it's like it's really just a very simple statement. He taught them stuff.
Yeah.
And we have.
And by the way,
I mean, there's nothing there. There's no context.
By the way, side note, but important one, I think, in the New King James, which is what I got here,
Mhm.
it doesn't say he was teaching them. It
just
says
makes-
he taught them.
Yeah, they make it simple past tense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the way to
Yeah.
translate the
Way to
aorist.
And but it's not an aorist tense verb.
No, it's not. It's an imperfect.
And I noticed in the New King James that they do translate the imperfect as simple past tense in a number
Yeah.
of places.
And I think they
And-
do a disservice to
Well,
do that.
perhaps, but when you look at this, there's no difference in the meaning. There's no difference in the meaning between the
Well,
two.
the imperfect implies continuous. Uh, What's the
Okay,
word? Continuous aspect. The aorist is undefined aspect. That's the difference.
well, okay, but it can include the continuous. There's no.
Yes.
Tell me what would actually substantively be any difference between saying there's a bunch of people followed him and he taught them. A whole bunch of people followed him and he was teaching them. Tell me what the difference is.
Continuous action.
No. Tell me the meaning. Describe to
It
me
took
something
time to
different.
do it.
Well, so did taught.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
I grant you that.
you can't describe to me logically and with
It's the same
with
sort of
substance
thing.
how it's different.
When you use the continuous, it implies to the person who's reading it that there is something else that the author wants to also add that you are aware of what's going on at the same time.
It does, but there is nothing else to be aware
But
of.
it's just implied.
But there's nothing else to be aware of, is what
I
I'm
know,
saying.
that's what I'm saying. That's why
And
it's
I'm
kind
not
of weird.
convinced that the New King James does it wrong. They're looking at the situation, saying English, the way you say that is simple past tense. There is nothing else to be aware of.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
And I'm not sure that then the Greek is necessarily using this imperfect always in a way that implies there's something else you ought to be aware of. Because in this case,
No,
the
not
way this guy
something.
wrote it, the way this guy wrote Mark, there's nothing else there to talk about.
You remember the discussion we had in the present tense when you have the option of doing either undefined or continuous in the
Right.
present tense.
Right,
You could say, I go or I am going.
right,
And we've had quite numerous discussions on that.
right.
And there is a difference. For instance, I told you about the time when I was a kid. I would answer my parents when they call me for dinner and I'm coming. Well, I wasn't in the process of coming when I said that. It meant that I was intending to come
That's what you meant
sometime.
by it. Yes.
So,
But in the
the
Greek, you have
continuous
no other
present-
way to say it. In the Greek, because you can't defend how you translate the Greek by the fact that there's a different meaning possible in the English. The Greek has
You're
one
right.
word for it.
Yeah.
And you can't just lay on it a distinction in the English meaning.
That's.
I think
grant
that's
you.
not fair.
But
And-
with the
and-
imperfect,
Okay,
by the author choosing the imperfect rather than the aorist, he has something to say. about it.
perhaps, or maybe that's the way he spoke Greek.
No, they have a whole tense just dedicated to the continuous aspect.
Okay, I haven't studied
In the
Mark, but I would wonder how much Mark uses aorist. And some of that discussion might be part of the understanding. But I understand they have another whole tense, but without an exhaustive study of all the Greek in the New Testament, I don't think we can really state how they always use it. And in a situation here where there is nothing else to understand about it, there's nothing to be said. I mean, he did teach, he was teaching, all have the exact same meaning in that sentence. There's no difference. I mean, you can't, in those English forms convey no difference in that
Okay.
isolation.
With that particular verb in that particular context, I think I could agree with
That's
you.
all I'm trying to get at, is that, and that really does make a difference, because we look back at the context and we go, well, why do I do this in English? And the King James simply said, New King James simply said, well, look, for the English to use this form, it implies something else is there you ought to be aware of. So let's put it in the simple past. And I don't think that's not a bad call.
No,
I'm,
in that verse, it's not.
and there may be others where it's wrong, but I've noticed that they have done that in some other cases. And I don't know that what they did was bad or I'm using. So there's one level of wanting to understand the thing to, gosh, how can I say?
Well, here's something I think relates to it, Dave. Mounts did make a point in the previous chapter. No, he talked about another verb, phileo, or maybe it was agape, and it was in the imperfect tense. And he asked the question, what does this imperfect in that verb imply about Jesus' relationship with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus?
Oh, he asked that question. I saw
Remember that?
That's actually number 5 in this
It is?
exercise.
Okay. Well, there is something.
I mean, I'm not even sure what that's supposed to mean. I'll be really honest, because this is another one where, all right, we'll get to that.
Okay, well, let's go forward, shall we? Number 3. Ekuon de tauta panta hoi pharisaioi. De is postpositive. You could translate it and, but, or now in a non-temporal sense. I chose now. The subject is hoi pharisaioi, the Pharisees. And the verb then is ekuon, which is our imperfect. It's got an augment of a lengthened epsilon.
Yep.
It's an eta. Ekuon. And since the subject is plural, I'm going to choose third plural for that. It could have been first singular, but
Right.
The Pharisees were hearing or were listening. If you choose listening, you need to say listening to
Right.
all these things.
Yes.
Now the Pharisees were listening to all these things.
Now for de, right?
Yeah. I put a note here. Let me. Okay. This is from Luke 16:14. In the context, Jesus had been teaching about the faithful use of unrighteous mammon, saying, "You cannot serve God and mammon." The Pharisees who were listening were mocking him because they were lovers of money, and they wrongly thought that riches were a sign of God's favor.
Okay.
So that was a comment that the author of the scripture put in there, just to point out that the Pharisees were listening to Jesus teaching about can't serve God and mammon, and it's unrighteous mammon. It's just something that it's commentary. Okay, number 4, ason. We saw that in our warm-up exercises. That's a form of ami. You remember that? It's imperfect.
Right.
Third plural. They were.
They were.
But I'm going to use the introductory form there.
Yeah.
There were.
Right.
Not they were, but there were many.
Introductory form. Okay.
Introductory there.
So there instead of they, because in this
Yeah.
case, there is acting in the same place as the subject.
Yes.
It is the subject.
Yeah. There were many people, but the context tells us they were tax collectors. There were
and sinners.
And sinners, yeah. I should have put that in there. There were many, and ekoluthun comes from akolutheo, and this is another imperfect. They were following him. Now there's a place where I chose to use began following him.
And okay, and why?
Well, I think from the context, this is again Mark 2, which is right after the one we were talking about, the crowds that came to him, and Jesus found Levi, who was a chief tax collector, and so that's why.
Which verse?
Mark 2:15. It's just 2 verses later. Jesus said, called Levi, another name for Matthew, and the tax collectors began following him. You could say they were following him, but I chose to say began following him because Jesus had just met Matthew, called him, and he came with Jesus. So other tax collectors did too.
Oh, and sinners. I mean,
okay.
There were many sinners and tax collectors following him.
Is that what the?
I mean, I think that's okay. I don't know that the context demands that.
No, it doesn't demand it.
I don't know. He was and he was there dining with them. Well, they followed him into the place to dine with him, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the other gospels said that Matthew made a dinner or had a party for him. And they all came to hear Jesus.
Yeah.
But this is where it got started.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I chose to use the word began.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, now we're getting to the verse I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Agapa, footnote 2. Why is this verb in this tense? Well, what tense is it?
Well, it's the imperfect.
Imperfect, third singular.
This is John.
Was loving. That's the basic form of the imperfect. Now, Jesus was loving Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So why is it in that tense? Why did Mark choose to put it in that tense instead of the aorist, which would have been loved them?
Well, it would imply that it was an ongoing thing.
Yes.
But if
Did
I
it-
translate it to the English that he loved them, I don't have a problem with
I don't
knowing
either.
that. I mean, it works both ways.
Yes, but the nuance of meaning from the imperfect tells you that it was not a recent relationship, and he had been loving them before that.
It does.
Yeah, that's why I believe that's why he used the
When you
imperfect.
can translate it.
It wasn't a
began.
new relationship.
See, but if the same Greek tense can mean he began right then to do it, and now you're saying the Greek tense says that it was happening before that time.
Well,
I'm
okay,
All right.
would you translate it, he began loving them at that point?
No, I think that would be terrible. But that doesn't mean that, but what I'm saying is I derive that from the full context because the context is that he'd known them already.
Yeah,
They were already his friends.
yeah,
So if they were his friends, he
yeah,
didn't just
it
start
reaches
loving them.
backwards as
It
well as
does.
forward.
What I'm, but the same Greek, in this case, you say that the Greek means that, but in the other case, you say the Greek means that it just then started.
Yes, because in the case of Levi and the other tax collectors, he didn't know them.
There's a sense of an ongoing thing that wasn't a single one-time event, but it doesn't tell us when it started.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
You have to get that from the
Well,
context if it's there.
Okay. And in the English, we would do the same thing. He was loving them. But I think in the English
A little
also,
awkward in English.
well, because in the English, we also mean the same thing with the simple past.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily mean it was a single event. It would be very odd with that verb to say, and he loved him, to mean it was a single isolated action. The context would show us that it was. Otherwise, it usually means something. When we say he loved him, it was something that was in the past. We usually mean it was something that's in the past and doesn't continue, might not continue till now. But because of opportunity, if the thing that's interesting about this, so what's the rest of this narrative actually written in? Because so much of the narrative is written in
John 11:5.
is in present tense, right? Often narratives in present tense.
Yeah, often.
So when he heard that he was sick, so like I'm just going to go here. What
John 11,
John 11:6, for
5 or
example,
6. 5 and 6.
is that present tense? I'm just really curious why they used anything other than present tense. Maybe because it's not an action. I'm just wondering. Style. I'm wondering if it's common to use some sort of past tense, aorist or imperfect, to indicate feelings as opposed to actions or something.
No, I don't think that's true because you can put most any verb in most any tense.
So this John chapter seems to be written in past and is written imperfect.
No,
Well, verse 6 is imperfect. Or is that an
no,
aorist?
akusen, that's aorist.
That's aorist. We haven't studied that yet. So that's aorist. Okay. And then it says he remained, the eminen, I don't know. Is that also?
Okay, go back here. Verse 6.
Yeah,
When therefore he heard, that's aorist,
aorist.
that he is sick, that's present. Then he stayed, that's aorist.
Yeah, this is a pretty complicated narration,
Well,
actually.
it's complicated in that it has
Yeah, it's
different tenses.
And they're used carefully, right?
Yeah,
He heard that he is sick.
yeah.
Now,
Then
in the narration, but here the narration is being done in present tense, right?
Well, no,
No, but look at it. Because he is sick. In English, you wouldn't say. You would say he heard that he was sick.
yeah.
In English, you wouldn't say he is sick. So the narration follows the common narration format, that things that we would normally make past tense are present tense. But then he uses he heard as a past tense.
But now don't make the mistake of thinking that all narration is always done in present tense. That's not true.
Well, okay, but I'm looking at this form, And clearly the narration is happening in the past, but he's using a present tense verb.
He did there, but
Well, okay, but
he doesn't, if you go on, he doesn't
I
always.
know, but I'm trying to establish I'm trying to establish how the tenses are being put together. He is sick is a clear thing that the narrative voice is speaking in a present tense thing. It's a thing that happened in the past from the point of view of the narrator, but he's using a present tense to establish the timeline at which it happened is in the present tense. The timeline at which this is happening is present tense, not past. And then he uses a past tense because it's something he heard prior to, right? Now he's saying he heard this, that he is sick. So it's like someone coming and saying, hey, this guy's sick. Well, he was sick when I left him. I mean, I don't know. It is an interesting, weird mix.
And then going on forward,
Right, he remained.
that's ain, that's the imperfect of Amy.
Well, he remained.
Yes, that's aorist there.
That's also aorist.
Yeah.
And he remained in which?
In the place he was.
Right.
That's imperfect.
So he remained is aorist in the place he was, which is now imperfect. The place he was at, he was staying. So if that's imperfect, it means the place he had been and was still at.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is good. And so we go on to the next.
But I want to introduce another thing here.
Okay.
About that word loved. It's imperfect in John 11:5, and I contend that it's there in the imperfect because the relationship is not a new one, it's a continuing one. But you have another example of the same word love when Jesus met the rich young ruler. I think it's
yes, and that's
Luke's
probably
account,
past tense.
It probably is, yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
He just met him.
Yeah, I get that.
And it said he loved him. Looking on him, he loved him.
But then he had no more relationship with that guy.
Well, the guy left, and the rich young ruler broke not the relationship necessarily, but broke the.
He didn't keep following him.
Yeah, he went away sad because he didn't want to do what Jesus said. But the scripture does say.
But as far as we know, that guy didn't come see Jesus anymore.
We don't know it, but I think that's in Mark. Anyway, it's just pointing out that word loved in the imperfect implies, I believe, a relationship that endures over a period of time, whether it's before the time of the statement or after, I don't know.
Okay.
Right.
I agree that that's what it's saying.
Have we gone far enough, or?
Well, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. We could do one more and then we'd finish this page.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
And then that's a good place to stop. Okay, kai erota auton t anamasoi by lege auto legion anima moi ati paloi esmen. Okay, I remember this one. This is where Jesus casts the legion of demons out of a man.
Yeah,
okay.
so I haven't done this one, so it's okay.
Oh, okay.
No, it's really all right. Let me catch up a little bit.
Okay.
So we're in. I'm just going to help myself a little bit so that I'm not lost. And it's verse 9.
Mark 5:9. Yes.
Okay. I want to cheat a little if that's all right. Okay.
Now,
right.
The verb eperota, that's our vocabulary word, I believe.
Yeah.
erotao is one word and eperotao is another one. They both mean I ask.
Okay, so he was asking,
But ep, the prefix, the prepositional prefix, I believe strengthens it. That's what often happens with a prepositional prefix.
We're begging,
Well,
we're begged.
begging, or sometimes it can be demanding or asking earnestly for.
demanding. Oh, that's interesting. He was asking him what,
Yeah.
what was his name?
Okay, so here's the demon-possessed man. And, oh, it's not the demons who were doing the asking,
No, it's Jesus.
it's Jesus, yeah.
Right.
And he was
Asking.
questioning him or asking him.
Right.
And I put as an option, he began questioning him. I'm tentatively thinking about it because he had just met
See,
him.
But why is this not simple enough to translate in the simple past tense? He asked him. This is a question.
Because it's not aorist, it's imperfect.
But how many times, it begs the question, did he have to ask him a lot of times? This is an ongoing
No, he
conversation?
didn't necessarily ask him a lot of times, but this is something that was happening.
But in what case would you in English say other than, he asked him a question? He
Well, I could
asked.
say he was asking him.
But you would normally say that if
You
you're
wouldn't
going
say
to
that.
say something else also occurred while.
That would be kind of like, and he was interrogating him, meaning there's a bunch of questions.
Right.
Not he asked him one question.
No, but you could say he began asking him.
In one question? But, Carl, what I'm having trouble with is that we have these things, but I'm like,
Well, it is an imperfect, not the aorist.
I agree.
So
but
there's a reason for it.
I'm not sure we have a firm handle on what the reason was.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying,
Okay.
because in English, I can't understand how you would use anything other than simple past tense to describe exactly the same situation.
I don't know if the context gives us any clues, but
I mean, which I'm wanting to hear, but I think just translating things by strict grammar rules isn't necessarily going to yield, because languages are not one-to-one, and
yeah,
we don't use, even in English, we don't use the same tenses the same way all the time.
No.
And it can be, I mean, it still works. It's just, we're kind of odd, but okay.
this is interesting. When the man saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshiped him.
Right, yes.
And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." Well, that's not so much the man speaking as the demon speaking there. For he said to him, come out of the man, unclean spirit. Okay, this is all happening before.
So the
our
aorist may, I mean, the imperfect may mean, okay, so for he said to, okay, because now it's saying, okay, verse 9, Kai, and so if it says then he was, it would really more like, for he was asking him, what is your name?
Mhm.
So it would almost imply that he asked him, what is your name, before he came out,
Yeah,
before he said the other
I
thing.
think so.
Yeah, and I mean, if we look at it that way, then it really makes great sense. So he cried out with a loud voice, saying, "What have you to do with me, you Jesus, Son of the Most High? I implore you by God that you do not torment me."
Torment me. Okay.
Yes, torment me. And then I'm reading from New King James. It doesn't really
I
make a
am too.
difference. Yeah. And then Jesus said to him, come out of, now what, okay, we have the Greek on that. Come out of the man, unclean spirit.
Where's, I'm looking for, come out, okay, that's verse 8. Yeah, exaltha, that's exerchomai.
So that's also imperfect?
No, that's that's imperative.
It's imperative. So we don't, with imperative, we don't really have
I
a
think
time
it's
sense, right?
aorist imperative.
Which means it past tense, or does it just?
Yeah, well, in the oblique moods, now that's a term you probably haven't heard yet.
Right.
The non-indicative moods.
Okay.
Imperative is one of the oblique moods. So is subjunctive, and
Okay, we haven't got to that.
no, you haven't.
So how would you translate that to me? Was this an ongoing thing or something he said right in that moment?
No, that's not that's a momentary thing.
It's a momentary command.
Normally
Okay.
now, so it'd
Yeah,
probably
come
be
out
more
now.
like present.
Yeah. Well, it's what I
Okay.
was about
Wow.
to say.
Okay.
In the oblique moods, the time element is the minor factor. The major factor is the aspect.
Okay.
And since this is aorist imperative, it's undefined. It
Okay.
could be momentary. It could be, well, undefined. It doesn't specify.
Right.
But with a command,
Okay.
usually you think of that as
So this order,
yeah.
so with that imperfect, this order of events might have looked like this. He asked him, "What is your name?" I'm just trying to understand it. The order might imply, the verbs might imply. He asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "His name is Legion." And he says, "Come out of the man." I'm trying to put it in an order that maybe this verbs imply.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
that would be important to know, right? Maybe. Because what order he wouldn't say, maybe that makes good sense because he comes up and says, "Get out of the man," and then he says, "What's your name?" And actually that doesn't quite make sense, right? If he just commanded him to leave, would he then ask him the name?
Well, I think what Jesus is getting at is it you, the man, or is it the demons in you that I'm asking about?
Well, perhaps, but he's speaking to the demon. The demon answers.
Yeah.
But it would make more sense, right, if he walked in and said, "What is your name?" And then he gives him his name and he says, "Get out of the man." And then the demon says, send us into the pigs. I mean, wouldn't that would actually probably flow better, which makes this sense a lot better to say he was asking him. Get out of the pigs. He was asking him, like before he commanded him. And the man's answer was, and then
I'm Legion for women.
Yeah, no, Carl, that is a really good use and makes good sense of how that tense is being used.
I really hadn't thought of all that when I translated it, but you're like a bulldog with a bone.
Well, I want to understand how it's working.
Yeah, you really dig into things, and that's a good thing. I mean, it can be a good thing.
It can be bad too. It can be irritating.
But I hadn't given it nearly that much thought, Dave.
Well, okay. I want to try to understand it in the simple context we have. I wish there was, I wonder how the Greeks deal with Koine Greek. I mean, it's in some form their native language, and I wonder if they aren't a little more keyed into how it's changed. I have no idea.
Well, I've heard that Luke has the most what's the term? Classical Greek is what Alexander the Great.
Well,
okay. No, the classical period was before
him, and he knew Attic Greek.
He knew Attic Greek, yes. But it was not in the form of Koine at that time.
No.
It was more like, this is not an exact similarity, but kind of like King James English differs from the English that we speak. It was and Luke
Yeah.
spoke very pure Greek, very highbrow Greek, if you want to use a term like that.
Which means it was closer
He-
to what?
He used a lot of the nuances of the earlier classical Greek
Okay.
that were still remnants of. For instance, the optative mood was dying out.
Okay.
Which, given
And-
the fact that he was a physician versus, say, John and Peter, who were
Yeah,
fishermen,
right.
you would figure he had a higher education.
Yeah,
He was
did.
yeah. Okay.
And so the vocabulary that Luke uses in both the Gospel of Luke and the Acts is he uses a lot more words than any of the other authors of
Yeah.
Scripture.
Okay. Oh,
And he
Carl,
uses
thank you. I appreciate your
grammatical
patience.
constructions that are more unusual.
More so than even Paul.
Paul didn't always use all that he knew with grammar. I think Paul wrote Hebrews,
I do too.
but not
The logic in
everybody.
Hebrews mirrors so much other Pauline words.
Yeah. I know that not everybody agrees with that.
That was
That's
the-
okay.
Those that proposed it as scripture originally, if I understand this right, were from
Hebrews, are you talking about?
yeah, Hebrews. I forget now the story, but they claimed it was from Paul. When I look at, and I always thought it was from Paul, but when I started looking more closely, I thought, well, but it doesn't quite seem like Paul. And I wonder if Paul had someone helping him to write it. Often Paul
Oh, I
had
don't think
someone.
Paul needed somebody to help him.
No, I don't mean that. But
He
some of
used
the-
amanuensis.
yes, he used people to dictate
Yeah.
for him. But I wonder if, at what point he wrote it, perhaps.
I wondered if he just used a different style writing it because of a different target audience.
Possibly.
Could be.
Yeah.
I believe the target audience was very important in the reason he did it anonymously.
I think
You
so
know,
too.
we can become really obsessed with the idea that authors will write something in the same style. That's just absurd.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
No.
if I'm targeting, I've written things in very different styles
Same
myself
here.
Me too.
for different people,
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're conscious of who we're talking to.
right?
At least if you're halfway decent writer.
Yeah. Well, it's not just writing, it's speaking too.
True.
When I'm-
Speaking, yeah.
When I would go on the job sites, I wouldn't use the same kind of language I would in the office.
Right, and I can think of like when I'm teaching the Bible, I use a totally different style teaching an adult Sunday school class than I did teaching my son when he was,
Mhm, 8 exactly.
years old and living at home.
Yeah. All proves, not, goes to show that we use different styles.
Mhm.
Everybody does.
Mhm. We have a different vocabulary depending on who we're talking to.
Mhm.
Okay, well,
Yeah, very good.
this has been very instructive, I think. Why don't we terminate the video thing and
Say good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Gracie.